Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Abdullah Al-Hashmi, a UAE 2020 Rhodes Scholar at the University of Oxford. I'm currently reading for the MSc in Economics for Development, and I graduated from NYUAD in 2020. I double majored in Economics and Philosophy.
Hello everyone, my name is Amal Al-Gargawi. I graduated from NYU Abu Dhabi with a bachelor's in social research and public policy, as well as a concentration in economics. In 2019, I was fortunate enough to have been awarded the Rhodes Scholarship to pursue postgraduate education at Oxford.
My name is Shaima Fadil. I am from the NYUAD class of 2018. I am originally from Morocco and grew up in the UAE. I enrolled at NYUAD in 2014, majored in biology with minors in applied math and CS. And I received my Rhodes Scholarship for the entering class of 2018. And I've been in Oxford for the past 3 years doing a master's by research in statistical genetics.
Hi, my name is Charlotte Wang. I graduated from NYU Abu Dhabi in 2014, where I studied social research and public policy. I'm currently in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm currently studying for a PhD in sociology at Columbia University. When I was at Oxford, I was studying for an MPhil in demography, and in between that and starting my PhD, I worked for a couple of years in research, and here I am.
My name is Farah Shammout. I'm an assistant professor, emerging scholar at NYU Abu Dhabi. Previously, I did my bachelor's degree at NYU in computer engineering, and then I was a Rhodes Scholar selected in 2016.
My name is Guillaume Sylvain. I was in the class of 2017, and I was awarded the Rhodes Scholarship in 2017.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hamel Al-Kubaisi, class of 2015.
Hi, everyone. My name is Munib. I am an NYAD class of 2020 graduate. I graduated with a bachelor's in electrical engineering. Right now, I'm doing an MSc in computer science at the University of Oxford as a UAE Rhodes Scholar.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Maitha Suwaidi, and I graduated with the class of 2021 at NYU Abu Dhabi with a degree in political science and minors in creative writing and SRPP, and I'm a UAE 2021 Rhodes Scholar.
My name is Maitha Al-Ma'mari. I graduated from NYU Abu Dhabi in 2018 and was the recipient of the Rhodes Scholar in 2018.
My name is Hur Al-Naimi, and I graduated from NYU Abu Dhabi in May 2021, and I was selected as the 2021 UAE Rhodes Scholar.
What makes NYU Abu Dhabi most unique is its goal to strive to fuse between having a cutting-edge, world-class, rigorous research and scientific facility, and at the same time to emulate and promote the liberal arts. Having realized that as an undergraduate, I decided to try to emulate NYUAD's goal by majoring in economics, which I take to be a discipline that strives for academic and scientific rigor, and my second major, philosophy, which more closely and traditionally espouses the liberal arts. Not only that, I think NYU Abu Dhabi also necessarily provides every student that goes through the undergraduate experience with an exposure to various disciplines that academia has to offer through the core classes and colloquia that we need to take. Having gone through that experience, I was necessarily introduced to the different literary canons, be it the Western or the Eastern canons. But at the same time also exposed to very contemporary literature about the arts, about screenwriting, photography and cinematography, and to be able to bring those two things together and do it at a world-class level that's so rigorous is something that I think no university can parallel. I left NYUAD, like I said, with an economics and philosophy degree, but also an knack for screenwriting and film photography, and it's just wonderful that I was able to get that from an undergraduate experience.
NYU Abu Dhabi is extremely unique because it brings students from all over the world, and it's part of NYU's global network. This makes it a gateway for curious young students to access backgrounds and cultures they have never been exposed to, both on campus and through study abroad. I also haven't seen anything like NYU Abu Dhabi's exceptional liberal arts education so far. As a computer engineer, I was also exposed to subjects way beyond my discipline, and this truly made me stand out as a well-rounded scholar. NYU Abu Dhabi's liberal arts education also continues to significantly impact my research today to be more interdisciplinary and exciting.
You see, NYUAD is not simply a university project. No. Let there be no mistake about this, that the creation of this institution in this part of the world that attracts the highest caliber of students and professors is an investment into the future of this part of the world only? Absolutely not. It's an investment into the future of the whole world, I say. An alternative vision, a dream of a better tomorrow and a better future. And what long-term vision that is. What sort of faith and futuristic thinking exemplified in the leadership of this country and of the university to plant the seeds, knowing fully well, that it will not bear fruit in a year or 2 or 3 or even 10. But one day, just one day, around the world will be NYUAD graduates who may not know each other by the name, since they might have graduated from different classes. But when they sit in a negotiating table, they will speak a common language. Now, what's that common language, you might ask? A world where differences are appreciated, not denied. A world where there is a genuine understanding that me and you can differ in our opinions, that we can disagree, that we can have different perspectives, but in the end of it, we never lose that respect for each other, that we spoke like true citizens of the world. Conflict and differences of perspectives are therefore perceived as opportunities to get to understand that other person. I cannot recall of any incident where my fellow NYUAD graduates were deeply entrenched in their opinions. Those were individuals who held their head high and with dignity, because it is in their DNA, and NYUAD nurtured that in us. Phil, let me be honest with you. We have had enough wars. Oh God, we have, especially in this part of the world, of misery, of conflict, of lost dreams, and generations upon generations losing the opportunity to live a decent life for themselves and their families. Now, will NYUAD solve all of that? Perhaps not. But it's certainly a step. No, it's a giant leap in the right direction.
I'd say that would be the diversity of the student body, which has, in a way, kind of created this culture of curiosity that has always been intrinsic to the NYUAD community. We really are a very curious community. I remember asking classmates in the dining hall questions as random as the etymology of the word art in their languages. And I've also gotten my own fair of questions. And this diversity of cultures and histories has certainly come to decentralize and challenge traditional hierarchies of knowledge that exist inside and outside of the classroom. And it is the reason why I leave NYUAD today with an ever-growing curiosity to learn in places as unconventional as the dining hall.
What's unique about NYU Abu Dhabi is that we literally have the world within our campus. You're engaging with over 200 nationalities on a day-to-day basis. You're sharing classes, you're learning together, you're discovering yourself within a community that has many individuals that care about the community. You're creating a global collective identity that cares about the world and learning together and growing together within the NYU Abu Dhabi campus. And being positioned specifically in Abu Dhabi, you get such a unique cultural experience, embedded in the traditions of the UAE when it comes to hospitality, discovering the beautiful Emirates, And being in NYU Abu Dhabi is a really unique experience for any individual, whether you're a student or a professor. You really get to look at life from very different perspectives. And that's a very special experience that NYU Abu Dhabi offers.
NYU Abu Dhabi is unique because it has successfully created and brought together one of the most diverse communities in the world that relate and connect to each other in so many ways, despite all of our differences. NYUAD is unique and successful because I am really capable of saying today that I have found for myself a chosen family that are currently immersed in their summer and post-graduation experiences all around the world. And we all have this really deep sense of faith that we will never lose touch of one another and that our paths shall cross again.
I think what makes NYUAD unique is this combination of the liberal arts college, the core curriculum, and the technical research university, especially when it comes to giving technical degrees like electrical engineering, specifically in my case. That becomes so important because when we think about the academic and business communities today, whether it be in computer science, engineering, business communities elsewhere, it doesn't matter. We realize that we can't solve purely technical problems anymore with just a technical and narrow approach. We need to take a broader look at what are all the other perspectives and disciplines we need to take into account when solving these issues. And one of the examples that I can give is when I was interviewing for my second course, Doctorate at Oxford, and I had a very technical research proposal. But the panel of people interviewing me, the panel of experts and professionals were from a variety of fields different from my own. And I received questions on the ethics, the politics of the technology I was proposing to design. And I also received questions on the journalistic writing standards I think should exist when we write about things like artificial intelligence, which is obviously a very technical concept. So I think I was able to draw on that liberal arts experience I had in NYUAD, a very broad, knowledge base to associate ideas from different fields and disciplines and provide more sophisticated answers. And I think that's what made the interview more successful. And I think what makes NYUAD students in general more successful is that they are able to work on challenges that require more complex thinking and combining information from various fields that they might not have the deepest experience in, but that they can very quickly learn to adjust and adapt to those situations.
The lesson that resonated most with me, that I learned from NYUAD, that has a day-to-day impact on my life, is the importance of garnering a growth mindset. The idea that there's always more to learn. There's always something that I'm ignorant about, and thus I should strive for excellence in my research, in my thinking, and into day-to-day conversations. But at the same time, even though I strive for excellence, I need to be through that awareness from the growth mindset, aware of my limits, that I might have biases, that I might be engaging in intellectual fallacies when I'm having a conversation. That develops a certain sensitivity towards the impact of what I'm doing. That can be shown in my economic discipline, where when I'm thinking about, let's say, the introduction of a certain policy, I'm very concerned with the general equilibrium effects. I'm worried about the potential unintended consequences of the introduction of a policy, but also in a conversation. An intercultural conversation I'm having with a student in the Rhodes community, I'll be more aware and more sensitive to the impacts of what I'm saying. And so I think that just reflects the critical, the healthy critical mindset that NYUAD develops. So it's balancing, empowering oneself, striving for excellence, but at the same time recognizing our limits and that there's always something to learn.
One of the most unexpected skills that I learned at NYU Abu Dhabi that still affects my day-to-day interactions now is the art of mediating conflict and reducing tension in conversations. In constantly meeting and working with people who come from diverse cultural, ethnic, racial, and socioeconomic backgrounds, and people who possess vastly different approaches to problem solving, the practice of engaging and mediating difficult conversations at NYU Abu Dhabi has proven to be an asset in my academic and professional life. navigating the exchange of views in an open and respectful manner was a daily exercise. They happened in the dining hall, in classrooms, in the dorms, in Florence at the Villa La Pietra. This has allowed me to both learn from my peers and to apply interesting dimensions like history, economics, and development philosophy, and to bring that onto a range of topics.
Probably the thing I learned from my time at NYU Abu Dhabi that most affects my life today is the ability to have thoughtful, respectful, challenging conversations with people who have very different set of experiences and may hold very different views to mine. When we look at the challenges that we're facing today as a society, a lot of those require us to have those kinds of tough conversations, and so it's a fundamental skill. And at NYU Abu Dhabi, we had many opportunities to have these conversations. They were raw, but they were honest and they were respectful. And when I got to Oxford, we continued to have some of those conversations on issues that affect our society as a whole. Questions like, how do you fight the world's fight? And what does that mean in the 21st century? Or when I studied law and then public policy, realizing the importance to be able to sit down with people who have different views and be productive and collaborative with them is something that I definitely learned at NYU Abu Dhabi.
Cooperation is possible. And that's the ultimate manifestation of NYU Abu Dhabi. For without cooperation, this institution would not have happened. Cosmopolitanism, I learned it to be something beautiful, something to be celebrated, appreciated, and most importantly, perhaps, protected. Why? Because without it, we lose sight of the bigger picture. Without it, we lose sight of our common humanity, that we have a common destiny, that our problems and challenges can never be solved locally because their effects are felt globally around the world.
Throughout my time at NYUAD, I was introduced to new modes of reading that always questioned this idea of representing the other, especially in literature. And as an Emirati Muslim Arab woman, this question of representation, which becomes very important in highly globalized settings such as NYUAD, followed me outside of the classroom into my day-to-day interactions on and off campus and across the NYU global network. And as a graduate now, I continue to reflect on this question in different ways as a writer, translator, and even as a scholar.
During my first year at NYU Abu Dhabi, I took this colloquium class called Disability. And one of the first things we learned in that class is about the social model of disability, which pretty much opened my eyes to the idea that disabilities become a hindrance when the systems put in place do not really account for people of determination during the creation of those systems, services, and provisions, and rather treating them as an afterthought. And I think this was a really important realization for me because it taught me that inclusion is a way of thinking. It taught me that it is a principle and value to follow in life, and that it should be at the forefront of every idea, experiment, construction project, artistic endeavor, research project, and so on and so forth. And I think that this groundbreaking realization and experience is the reason I am continuously learning to question, learn, unlearn, and relearn everything that I am taking in and everything that I'm being exposed to each step of the journey.
What I learned at NYAD that most affects, I would say consistently, my everyday life is how to work in intercultural and multicultural environments, both at school but also in a work environment. I also learned how to work with people across disciplinary boundaries to solve very complex and sophisticated challenges in a more complex manner. What I really took away from NYD is that it's not just about gaining, the job skills, but it's also gaining the life skills. And so what is mostly important in that is I learned not to make assumptions about people different from my own, coming from different communities, no matter how well I think I might know their experience or their background. And that becomes even more important when you think about the Rhodes Scholar community, which is also similarly diverse. It has over 20, I think, constituencies represented in even more countries. So being able to integrate into that very diverse space, I handled it very well because I had that experience from NYAD. My class had over 76 nationalities represented, and I think subsequent cohorts were even more diverse. So I was used to that kind of intercultural experience where you're trying to tackle issues across cultural and ethnic boundaries while being fully respectful of all the differences that your community and the different communities share.
When reflecting on how my time at NYU Abu Dhabi and how the Rhodes Scholarship have supported my educational journey, I am filled with immense gratitude. My 4 years at NYU Abu Dhabi were truly transformative. From the rigorous academic coursework to the sea of available opportunities for professional, social, and artistic engagements across the global network, these were all elements that helped build my intellect, my character, my leadership style, and above all else, my commitment to service. NYU Abu Dhabi was also undoubtedly a critical catalyst for the Rhodes Scholarship, with the unwavering encouragement of faculty such as Professor Deborah Williams, Professor Zainab Ozgen, Professor Maida Berg, to name a few, of staff like Doug Cutchins at the CDC, of friends and of family. I was fortunate enough to have been able to carry on this journey at Oxford.
I think one of the most important ways in which my time at NYU Abu Dhabi shaped my educational journey was by showing me that I could be the one deciding where that journey goes. So I was in the first cohort to be at NYU Abu Dhabi, and because so much was still in flux when we started, we were given a great deal of autonomy to decide what we wanted our educational experiences to look like. And I think that experience really taught me to question these assumptions about what higher education should be, especially because I had so many professors who were precisely there because they were motivated by this potential for rethinking norms of teaching and academic inquiry. So while I was at NYUAD, I encountered a number of really incredible thinkers in my professors, and they were studying all kinds of things: sociology, literature, film, ecology, history, philosophy, but all with a really acute awareness of how their interests were situated in particular social and political contexts, and how these kind of seemingly niche topics could speak to contemporary social issues. And I think they really taught me that everything we learn can become a tool for our liberation, for improving our communities, and for rethinking our engagement with the world. I think in many ways, becoming part of the Rhodes community and studying at Oxford was an extension of that process because it exposed me to so many of the different paths that the other scholars had taken with their education, both at Oxford and beyond. And being part of that community really shaped the interdisciplinary way in which I approach my research in sociology. I think it really showed me how valuable it is when we bring people together across disciplines to address a really focused set of issues, instead of kind of each of us going into our own little niches. And I think maybe perhaps the most direct way in which NYUAD shaped my educational journey was by fueling my interest in migration studies, which is something that I had an interest in growing up because my parents were immigrants to the US, and so was I. But Abu Dhabi is a crossroad for so many people, different people from so many different cultures. It really was kind of the perfect place to start thinking about a lot of these strands of global migration and how we are interconnected across these different places.
When I got to NYU Abu Dhabi, I was an 18-year-old boy full of curiosity and thirst for new experiences. But I'd say that it's really at NYU Abu Dhabi that I understood the value of thoughtful and rigorous scholarship. It's the countless hours spent in the classroom with the faculty or in field trips going around the world and testing out our knowledge real time that I appreciated the importance and the value of knowing how to have thoughtful conversation, how to structure an argument, and how to ask the right questions. And I think that's the most important thing that someone can get from an undergraduate education. When I got to Oxford, a lot of that knowledge was very helpful to me in helping me embark in a new field, which was law at the time in my first year. I realized the breadth of life experiences that I had gathered at NYU Abu Dhabi and how much that helped nuance and structure my thought when I was at Oxford. I'd also say at NYU Abu Dhabi, I was able to cultivate friendship. And that's probably the way that I learned the most from my experience. And these are relationships that I maintain to this day and that continue to enrich my life.
A piece of advice that I'd like to share with current NYU Abu Dhabi students is to create your own blueprint for your precious time in the city and for lifelong success, health, and happiness. Don't feel obligated to pursue one drawn for you by alumni or friends or even family. But I guess this does beg to question, what would you need to create a blueprint? Surely a good understanding of yourself, a clear vision for your future, a grasp of your surroundings, what resources, people, or internships can help bring you closer, and an innovative, resilient spirit when matters go awry.
So an advice for an NYUAD student would be to remember that passion doesn't have to be singular. There are people who have this burdening passion that drives them throughout their life. But if you have many interests and you don't know where to put your energy, that's also entirely fine. Just what matters is just to get started with anything, any one thing that you're interested in. Put your full heart into it, and after a few years, take a step back, see who you've become as a person, what matters to you then, and then readjust and move on to the next thing. I think professors do incite us, and I'm sure you as well, to do as many drafts as possible of an essay. And so I think that mindset to do as many drafts as possible of your sort of career or life is really important to be comfortable with, to progressively refine who you are as a person and what's the best contribution you can make to your environment and to the people around you.
If there is one thing that I would want to say to a current NYU Abu Dhabi student, I'd say that learning isn't only found in the classroom and in internships and in summer experiences that you get to put in your CV or in your transcript. It is also found in the friendships and the time that you carve out for yourself, for your friends and for your loved ones, and for all of the self-discovery that you are bound to undergo if you just give yourself a chance. So give yourself a chance. Unlearn the idea that productivity is only about what you have in your CV and transcript, for it is way, way more than that, and give yourself a chance to explore that idea.
So NYUAD's location in the UAE was pretty significant for me. When I enrolled, I had already been living in the UAE for more than a decade. But to be honest, when I first decided to enroll at NYUAD, my thinking was, this is the university that has the right mindset for me, but I'm probably going to miss out on the whole experience of studying abroad in a new country. Surprisingly, that was not the case, because when you're in an academic setting and also, away from your family, you, regardless of your location, whether it's in your home country or abroad, you still do grow differently as a person. And to me, the impact of that was to, understand the UAE in a whole new lens. First of all, by looking at it from a more academic perspective. But also, it was interesting to see how my classmates who had never been to the UAE, the Gulf, or the Middle East, how they were experiencing that region and the questions they were asking and the impressions they had of it. It was actually quite an interesting experience to be in the UAE at NYUAD. And so overall, that cemented the UAE for me as a place where I could see myself building my career afterwards, and cemented it as a home base. I could see the needs of the country that were linked to my field, to my interests, and I could see that there were opportunities there. And then on a more personal note, I think as much as I'm a proponent of going abroad, experiencing different places, when you go to a different country and you're a minority there, you eventually end up making sacrifices, whether it's about being far from your family or just being in a culture and environment that's not fully in line with yours. And some people do enjoy that and like being in these very different environments, but others don't necessarily, and sometimes they don't go abroad because of that. They don't want to make that sacrifice. In that context, NYUAD sort of, I think for students, but also for many staff and early career faculty, offers this sort of safe haven for people who do not want to make that sacrifice. They still want to be in a certain cultural environment, but can still receive an incredibly good education and have access to incredible opportunities.
Having NYUAD be in the UAE really defined my university experience both personally and academically. On a personal level, I worked with the amazing Office of Community Outreach, which is part of NYUAD Student Life. And it does an amazing job connecting to local organizations and initiatives and fostering those close relationships to create really unique volunteering opportunities for students. And that really pays off because I think 2/3 of students volunteer during their time at NYUAD, and I was one of those. I worked with the Future Rehabilitation Center in Abu Dhabi to really connect to the local UAE disability community and see and work with children with disabilities for mentorship and teaching opportunities. And that was really important for me because it's not just about the classroom experience, it's also NYUAD investing in the student experience beyond the classroom in a way. It's a more holistic approach, I think, to education. And I received amazing logistical and other support from the Office of Community Outreach, creating transportation to the volunteering site regularly on a weekly basis, always asking for feedback about how they can improve the close relationships they have with local UAE initiatives. And, it really pays off because of the large number of students working in communities in the UAE and making an impact in the causes that they care about. But also academically, I took a January term class called Human Prehistory, a Genetics Approach, and we looked at the human migratory patterns of our ancestors, how they moved out of Eastern Africa and then settled the globe. And we got the chance to go to the southern Omani desert near Salalah and camp there and undertake excavation while working alongside really famous archaeologists from National Geographic. And I don't think that would have been possible if I studied in my home country or even if I studied in the US and the UK at top universities. So I think NYUAD does really well about looking at all the resources and opportunities in the UAE and in the region, and how can it leverage those to optimize the student experience, while also providing students the chance to contribute to UAE local communities in their own way, I think.
I think success is often kind of a fleeting and changeable thing, but I can try to offer a little bit of my vision of what a successful life would look like. I don't think success for me centers on a particular vocation or a particular place. I think my definition of success would be helping to build a mutually supportive and generative community where I know I'm contributing in a meaningful way and living in relationships of reciprocity with the world around me. I think those are the broad outlines, but I think there could be a lot of different pathways to creating that kind of engagement with the world. And I had a number of mentors and peers throughout my college years and afterwards who really modeled that kind of generous engagement with the world and made me think that that is possible as a way to live.
So I define success as the achievement of personal goals, no matter how big or small those goals are. This stretches from professional goals to relationships like forming lifelong bonds to achieving physical and mental well-being and a balanced lifestyle. From a professional perspective, it also means that you do what you love and what you're passionate about rather than achieving a particular award or a title. And alumni success is also about seeing alumni give back to their communities in any capacity, such as by mentoring current students or by simply being good ambassadors of NYUAD. And here I am back at NYU Abu Dhabi as faculty.
Over the past few years, particularly as I found myself in different competitive environments, I began to acknowledge that we're oftentimes conditioned to perform success in certain ways. Success becomes this public performance of grade, this public performance of awards. But success for me has always been in the little achievements gained throughout, little achievements that reflect the most vulnerability and growth, that are known to you and celebrated by you only far away from this idea of a public audience.
Success can be defined in many ways. If we're talking about individual success, career success, professional happiness, I think people define success very subjectively. For me, success is defined by the impact that I'm having, whether small or big, in my day-to-day interactions with people, whether it's my family, individuals I work with. I try to leave a optimistic and hopeful impression with the people that I interact with. And if I do that in my small interactions, whether day to day or bigger interactions, then to me, I have succeeded.
I think before moving to Abu Dhabi, my knowledge of the UAE really only extended to a kind of surface understanding of its geopolitical identity. Growing up in Minnesota, you would see it in the news, but it seemed like something that was very far away. And of course, being a student from overseas and having grown up in the US, my entire engagement with the UAE was really through being part of the NYUAD community, through living in Abu Dhabi, through learning more about the UAE in the classes that I took, and through doing some of the community work that I took part in when I was living there. I think what I really came to understand is that the UAE is this place that is rich with histories of trade and migration, and that there are all these diverse communities of people that have come through there to make a life, to settle down for short periods or for long periods. And it's really this meeting place of so many different languages and cultures. Later on in my academic research, I had the chance to visit some of these communities where migrants have come from to go to the UAE. And it was really interesting to see how kind of their time in the UAE had shaped these communities that were in India, that were in Sri Lanka, and to see how the kind of culture of the UAE reaches, beyond its political involvement, but through all these little things that manifest in the ordinary lives of people.
Being a student at NYU Abu Dhabi definitely shaped my perception of the UAE. I grew up in a place where the Middle East tended to be painted with very broad brushes, and living in a community in the Emirates and building friendships with some of its local residents really made me attuned to the complexity of the society in which I was being hosted, some of the richness of its history, and I'm grateful for the opportunity I've had to learn more about that fascinating region. One of the images that strikes a lot of people when they think about the Emirates are the skyscrapers and the tourism sector and the ambitious projects that the country is rolling out. And while that's definitely part of what the country is projecting, what I was able to learn much more about over my time in the Emirates is the depth and the richness of its long history. Fascinating flows of migration that have happened in the region that have shaped what the UAE currently is and what it continues to be. And it's a society that's grappling with a fascinating set of challenges for the 21st century. And so being there as a witness to how some of those challenges were being addressed, and discussing with my peers what ideas they had on what trajectory their country could take in the future, was a fascinating experience to be a witness to.
When one thinks about the Rhodes Scholarship, they obviously think about the University of Oxford. But aside from that, they think about the countless cohorts of students from all around the world, people with different specializations, that have studied at different universities, and that have different cultural backgrounds. And to be able to succeed in an environment like that, one needs to have cultivated a certain sensitivity for intercultural dialogue. And at least when I think about successful intercultural dialogue, I think about NYU Abu Dhabi. From the get-go, we're required and let's say supported to engage in intercultural dialogue with students from all around the world as first years. And at the beginning, we might have nothing in common but a favorite TV show or a favorite sports team. But with time, we find different ways to engage with people from different places and to develop real, authentic relationships that are long-lasting. And to be able to succeed in the Rhodes community, one needs to be able to do that. So NYU Abu Dhabi, I think, provides an unprecedented opportunity for that kind of cultivation, again, of the sensitivity for intercultural dialogue.
So the main aspect to me at NYUAD that prepared me to make the most of my experience as a Rhodes Scholar was its education mindset. I think NYUAD doesn't silo you into a single discipline. You might be a science major, but when you're in that core class on theater or linguistics, you are expected to contribute as much as anyone else to the discussion, and your contribution is taken seriously. And so what happens is, while that might be difficult as you're in the class, at the end of the day, it gives you this confidence in your ability to be able to try your thinking at different issues, regardless of whether you've been exposed to them before or whether they're, part of they're linked to your discipline. And so the way that translated for me, coming to Oxford, which is slightly bigger than NYUAD, is it sort of incited me to seek out people outside my department who think about the world differently, who care about different issues, and have really interesting and fruitful conversations with them. But in the bigger picture, that mindset is really important to allow you to see other contributions you can make outside your field that other people wouldn't necessarily qualify you for. And at the end, it puts in front of you opportunities that you probably, without that mindset, would have disqualified yourself from.
So my time at NYU Abu Dhabi prepared me to become the scientist, teacher, and world citizen that I am today, and the Rhodes Scholarship was just one stop along that journey. Through that, NYU Abu Dhabi has instilled in me the values of the Rhodes Scholarship through its extraordinary education and research, lifelong mentorship by its faculty, access to extremely rewarding leadership and service opportunities beyond the classroom, both in Abu Dhabi and on a global level, and its commitment to make sure that every single student is heard and being taken care of. So NYU Abu Dhabi gave me a remarkable experience that allowed me to expand and reach my potential.
It taught me many things, but I will focus on two things that made the biggest difference for me. First, striving, constantly striving and never stopping in our pursuit of excellence. And that academic rigor and originality is the cornerstone of any curious mind that strives to make a difference and a positive impact in this world. Now, I learned this in my school. I refined it at NYU Abu Dhabi, and I embraced it fully at Oxford University. The second, I believe, is a genuine commitment to service. We always begin with the end in mind. And at NYUAD, the end was clear. The wealth of knowledge that we received, the research that we engaged in, and the projects that we participated in are all directed towards benefiting society and giving back. It was a constant reminder that we are part of the city we are in, and that we are part of the whole world that we are living in. Not in ivory towers, not engaging in irrelevant work or research. The Rhodes Scholarship embodies to its core. And many scholars throughout history have made a difference in their respective fields, all of which have impacted their communities.
My time at NYU Abu Dhabi did not just prepare me academically for what Oxford has to offer when it comes to the academics and the studies and the research that we were doing, but most importantly, it prepared me for the interactions that I was going to have with people from around the world, and not just any type of people that are driven to be leaders within their society and their community, and being surrounded by that from the early age of like 18 and being nurtured within that community really shapes a person's identity, so that they're able to persevere across all challenges and are able to hold conversations through respectful and engaging manners, and come from places that are curious and want to learn more about each other as individuals.